Hello and welcome to another MarketMuse content strategy webinar. Today's discussion is called How to Use Content to Grow Your Online Community and Vice Versa. And today's special guest has experience in building his own communities, running his own podcasts, and really everything under the sun that we're going to talk about related to content, really building thought leadership, and really using your community as inspiration to develop content. Some housekeeping. If you haven't been part of a MarketMuse content strategy webinar in the past, please ask us almost anything in the chat. And our colleagues will be passing along ones if they think that they are in line or fit perfectly for our discussion. We'll try to get to them at a Q&A segment at the end. Anything that overlaps, we're also doing an Ask Me Anything session in the MarketMuse Content Strategy Collective Slack community. There's a bit.ly link here, bit.ly/CSCAMA. You can go register now so that you'll be ready when that AMA starts on the hour at the end of this hour with our guest. You will get the recording in a couple days or tomorrow, depending on when we can get it out. So when you're going and grabbing that recording, go check out some of our other recordings. We've got over 50 amazing content strategy, SEO, technical SEO, everything under the sun, topics about content strategy and building great content. Go download a few of those, shoot me a note at jeff@marketmuse.com and we'll set up a content strategy session to go over your sites. All right, that's enough of our housekeeping. So going back to our guest, he is the founder of Black and White Zebra. He's also the founder and host of the Indie Media Club podcast, which I was just recently on, and I had such a good time, and it's such a great reporting. Ben Aston, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Awesome. So tell me a couple things, a little bit about Black and White Zebra, a little bit about Indie Media Club podcast, some recent guests you've had and the spirit of that. And then also just give us a breakdown of all the different communities that you have interacted with or worked with to inspire you.
Yeah, so let's start with Black and White Zebra. That's the name of our company, which is not really a customer-facing brand in any way. It's just our company, and the company, we call ourselves a media company, and what we talk about is being on a mission to make boring things understandable and fun. And really, that's at the heart of what we're doing. We're picking things that other people might not think are particularly sexy, but we're trying to inject some fun into it. We're trying to make it understandable and accessible. And so as part of our family of sites that we have a site called the Digital Project Manager, which is our biggest site. We launched that back in 2011, 2012. And we have a bunch of other sites as well, including, and you'll get the hang of what we're doing in a second, the product manager, the e-com manager, the CX lead, people managing people, the CX, what else we've got? We've got about 8 different sites. Right. And each of these sites have a bunch of content in them. And what we're rolling out and creating in each one of these, or for each one of these sites, is a community. And we have community training, and then we also monetize through advertising. So we create a bunch of content and we monetize through content and community. And yeah, you mentioned there the Indie Media Club podcast, which is something I started last year. We've had some great guests on there, including Jeff Coyle himself. I was just talking to Jeff earlier. I just interviewed Ian Bell from Digital Media Trends Group, and there's a whole bunch of other podcasts. If you're interested in creating content and monetizing content and then combining that with community, the things that we're excited about are content and community. So check out indiemedia.club where you can find out more about that. But yeah, that's what we're doing. We're building community, and for our largest community, it's called the Digital Project Manager. We have about 30,000 subscribers. Until just on the end of the year, we had about 4,000 people in our Slack community, which we've actually just turned off, but we can talk about that in a minute. And yeah, so these are sites that are growing, not just content but community as well, and we're bringing these things together. And for us, that's our secret sauce, which I just shared.
I love it. I can't wait to talk through more of the details and also about that Slack community nugget that you dropped there. Are you sending them to the Content Strategy Collective? Because that would be cool. But anyway, No, so tell me, so when you're thinking about content with regard to community, you know, a lot of people ask, where are you? What are you thinking about for formats of content? Like, what do you define content as with regard to, you know, the websites that bolster or act as a foundation for a community? What are the different formats that you have found have the most impact? Is it based on the persona of the target audience, or is it just some sort of formula that you're following?
Yeah, so I think when we are thinking about formats, I think it's worth, I think sometimes, and I'm totally guilty of this, like blindly following the keyword volumes and the keyword difficulty, and you know, sorting by difficulty and volume, and chasing that just because I know I can do it and I know it's easy and it makes me feel good because I have volume and I have traffic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, intent is so important. And so
Mm-hmm.
actually, when we're thinking about format, what we're thinking about, okay, well, what format is best and what format works is based on what we're trying to achieve and the effectiveness of what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to kind of the way that we monetize, well, that we got three different things we're doing. We have online training, we have membership, and we have advertising. So when we're thinking about the format of content that we're creating, yes, we create some video content, we create podcasts, we create keyword articles, but actually probably the most popular format that we create are the how-to guides.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the how-to guides are super important because there we have the intent of someone who's trying to find out how to do something, and then we can help them on their journey. And that transition then into training or into membership is not such a giant leap. So there are some like keyword topics as well that match or align with the user intent, or demonstrate to us that someone might be in the market for membership or training. For example, like how to update my project manager resume tells me if someone is searching for that, like project manager resume sample or example, it tells me that someone is trying to change jobs or they're in the market for some kind of transition. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to identify those, I guess, key points, those milestones in someone's career or in their life, which might be giving us a signal by their search that they might be in the market for our training or our membership. So we're trying to be creative in thinking through what those opportunities might be, what might signal that someone would be in market for what we're trying to create. And then we create how-to guides around it, we create keyword posts around it, podcasts, videos, but really the bulk of what we're focusing our efforts on are the keyword driven content to drive organic traffic.
Well, and I know you use the more personalized view of keyword difficulty now, but you know, when you're thinking about the repurposing content, are you repurposing content from podcasts? You had said that, you know, you're making these decisions. I mean, you're telling me kind of what goes in the heart of persona development. Frankly, it's like target audience assessment, really understanding how they tick and understanding the intents. Are you repurposing content from the podcast or from other, you know, structures and formats and putting them into, you know, different places and things like that with these communities?
Yeah, we're trying to experiment with slicing and dicing a lot more. I think a good example of that is, with our podcast, one of the things that we do is transcribing all those podcasts, creating show notes for those podcasts, just to create opportunities for internal linking, yep. Which is obviously super important. And then we're recycling for social as well, so that we have a little featured snippet of a 20-second video that we can post on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it might be. So we are doing some repurposing. We're also looking at actually the format of the members events that we're creating as well. And we're trying to think about content's kind of longevity and recyclability. right from the start. So as we're kind of brainstorming, okay, what content should we create? We're thinking through, okay, well, what does this look like as a topic in the podcast? How could this work in our forum? How does this work across our different channels? So that we're kind of trying to evaluate whether or not it has legs or not. What we don't want is to create content that is difficult for us to market or difficult for us to then email out to our mailing list. We're just kind of making life difficult for ourselves. So we're trying to reduce the scope of what we produce to really only create content where we know, okay, this has legs, this is something that's topical, it's relevant, it aligns with our personas, and it has repurposability. So we can talk about this in an AMA session, we could do a workshop about it, we could do a webinar, and that also is important because then we're building out that cluster and authority around that topic.
Yeah, I think that's on the nose. I mean, you've almost basically built a checklist for the audience today. It's that possible shelf life or the hopeful shelf life. How frequently does this need to be updated? How, what other formats could this be repurposed to if it's successful? I always recommend, seeing if it met that initial expectation level of success before you really get aggressive on the repurposing side. That works in arrears too, because you can go back and say, what were my most successful posts? And let me start to transcreate and morph those into my other more successful or channels that might attract a different audience. So I think you've hit that right on the head. And internal linking, like you mentioned, is huge. So I think that's really a how-to guide for a lot of the things we're going to talk about. But another thing I thought that you said that was really interesting was, when you're building a community, you're trying to give them an experience that they might expect inside the community by effectively saying, we've got experts in here. Here's the kind of value that you will get. And so, is that how you think about why you would want to provide a how-to document? It's kind of like, here's the type of value you would receive. Is that why you get into the weeds? Is there other things at play when you're making those types of decisions for that type of training? So
yeah, I think what's super important for us as we are building a community is credibility.
Right.
And I think, and this is why we don't use copywriters to just write. We'd never get a copywriter to write a how-to guide. Right. Because it just won't quite ring true, and people will read it and they'll expect something from us, and we won't then be delivering on it. And I think within this whole ecosystem that we've created, therefore, it raises the bar of what's acceptable, because everything that we create plays into this underlying really brand perception that is super important for us. And as we're trying, we're monetizing community, we're charging people to be part of something in order to get people to that point where they're happy to pay some money. We have to build that credibility. So we get experts to write the content for us, subject matter experts, and that is why the how-to guides are so useful to people. When we're trying to be really specific about how to do a particular thing, and as with anything, when you try and explain how to do something, right, the typical response that you'll get from people is, well, it depends. So what we try and do is make it more long tail. So how to create a statement of work template for a web design project. So let's make the how to create a statement of work. Let's make that longer tail so the search intent is clear. So we meet that search intent more definitively within the content that we're creating, but then also gives us scope to write about other things, how to write other types of statements of work as well, as an example. So I think really trying to eliminate the fuzziness and trying to get people the answer they need as quickly as we can is super important, because that's driving the credibility. That's then supporting us in the brand building that we're trying to do.
And that's growing organic search authority as well. I mean, that authority matrix that gets developed is to say, how likely would it be that someone who truly was the expert on building a statement of work if they only wrote one page about it. It makes absolutely no sense. It's highly unlikely that that person is going to actually be the expert. You will have had to have encountered these other problems, answered these other questions, done how-tos on specific different types of templates, and this is coming from someone who, I don't know anything about that explicit thing, but you can map that to any experience. The perspective of the one word, one page is dead in the locker and should have been years ago. But you're talking about, yeah, it's okay if we're building something that is for a really specific need, because that's building credibility. It's developing value, but it's also establishing that then when I do cover something generally on SOWs, I'm gonna have a chance to perform because I've got all this street cred built from my collection of content. And so getting in the weeds is really important for two reasons, right? Like you mentioned, it's to grow that authority, even if it's not getting a ton of direct traffic. But it's also, when a member goes in there, they may have that specific problem. You've gained their trust forever.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. I love that. So talking about member walls and paywalls or membership communities, how do you make the decision? Do you tease content outside of the wall? Do are you teasing the fact that there's a lot of great stuff in here? And I've seen it done in so many different ways. I'd love to know what's your course of thinking there.
So our journey has kind of taken us all over the place with this, and we started off with an alpha of membership where we did paywall content, and one of the things that we heard from people was that they wanted to hear stories, they wanted to hear case studies of real life examples, really getting into the weeds. That's what they told us they wanted. So we paywalled that content. We created it first, which is a lot of work, paywalled it, and then it turns out that no one was actually interested in it. So I think it's difficult sometimes when people tell you they want one thing, but then if the data gives you a different answer, I'll follow the data. So that was tricky. So we tried paywalling content. Another thing that we did was, we know one of the things that's super popular and with our communities is always going to be something that they need are templates. So actually, when we began membership, we were paywalling our templates. That we used to use them as lead magnets, and then we switched it to becoming a paywalled content. So because one of the things that we found when we were using them as lead magnets is that we grew our mailing list hugely. We doubled our mailing list in a year. We went from like 15,000 to 30,000 subscribers, doubled the mailing list through the use of lead magnets. But maybe it was the lead magnet we were using or lead magnets we were using, but the quality of those subscribers was really poor, because the reason that they subscribed was because they wanted the thing. It wasn't because they wanted to be part of what we were creating and what we were doing. So one of the things that we discovered was, actually, let's try putting these resources behind our membership paywall. But then we've evolved since then as well. And similarly to the situation with lead magnets, what we're discovering with membership is that just because someone wanted a template doesn't mean that they want to pay to be a member. If you're just sticking up a paywall in front of people, sure, they'll pay it, but we want them to be paying on a recurring basis. So actually what we're in the process of doing now is actually removing the e-products, which are things like templates, and just allowing people to transact outside of the membership ecosystem. Because if they just want something, let's sell them the thing and then they can get out of there. And we're changing our membership from being a paywalled content kind of membership and resource-based membership into more of a community-based membership. So the value that you get from the membership is more that it's the masterminds that we're creating, it's the forum that we've created. It's about creating a community and being part of a community and getting the support there and helping other people, rather than it being about paywalling content, because as a membership play, I don't think paywalling content is from our experience anyway, has been a sustainable way. What we see is just really high attrition rates. People sure will stick around for 3 months, and then they'll realize, hey, I'm not actually using this. I got all the templates I wanted on the first week, and now I don't need it anymore. So that's kind of been our evolution.
It's almost like they have to receive recurring value to desire to pay for recurring value.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one other thing is that it takes time. Like being part of a community, that transaction isn't, they have to keep getting value. They're not going to get that value if they haven't invested in it,
right?
And if they haven't stuck at it for a while. Like it takes time. So yeah, one of the other things we just did was change. We no longer offer monthly memberships. We no longer offer free trials, because you're not going to get the value out of it in that trial period or within that month. You have to be in there for a year, really, or at least 6 months before you start seeing the value. So we're trying to change people's mindsets and constantly tweaking our product offering to better align with creating something that's long-term and sustainable for us.
Yeah, I think that's really a great journey. I think people can learn from that. Kind of don't start with that quick and easy win, because it might create the wrong type of audience. It might create an audience that isn't going to give to get. They're paid something, it's some sort of resource, and that can be for any info product, really. It's, are you comfortable with this subscription? Are you comfortable with the one-time purchase? There's a lot of ways to consider that. And I'm interested in, with that community, have you done some research of those, your marquee users, or users that have renewed, users that have bought annual, and where they describe to you what is that recurring value that they're getting, so you can really lean into that?
Yeah, we recently did a insights gathering. We actually hired a third party to do this for us and get some of those insights on, okay, for users who have churned, like why did they churn? For users that have stuck around, what are the things that they find most useful? What are their biggest pain points? So yeah, understanding why people are doing what they're doing is super important. And I think the better understanding that we have of how people are using the product, why they're using it, the more that we can tailor it to what they need. And we kind of layer that on with the data. So remembering that initial mistake that we made was, don't just listen to what people say, look at what they do as well, and try and marry those things as best you can.
Do you use the feedback that you received there, or just what observations in the data do you use for content inspiration? So
yeah, I think one of the things that people like, and I suppose that came through, was showing as much, like going into the weeds as much as you can. And I think how we've, I guess, tried to differentiate from other training and other community out there is really lifting the lid like completely off, and kind of this no holds barred type approach, where we really want to get really down into the details, because I think there's the kind of like the high level theory that people can talk about, and we want to go to the kind of level lower than that. And that's really come through our insights, where people are saying, hey, this is super helpful when you go down a rabbit hole and keep digging into a specific scenario. Those specific scenarios and those specific details really narrow the focus of the conversation and the focus of what you're talking about. You start getting really specific, but I think it then becomes more useful to someone who has that specific issue. Yep. And I think the danger can be when we know that a topic is so broad that we stay very high level rather than getting down into the specifics. So yeah, it feels like sometimes, oh man, this is only going to be relevant to 2 people, but at least for those 2 people it has been super relevant, rather than for 10 people it being kind of relevant. So yeah, relevancy is super important. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but it returns the results when you're actually helping those people in a lot richer way than they would if you'd have just stayed high level.
Yeah, you can't manufacture that. You can't manufacture the fact that somebody who, comes into the community, then they are inspired to give because they received something, some amount of value from something. Maybe it was personal value, maybe it was business value, maybe it was a connection or a friend or a peer. You can't make that happen. And then in return, they're going to be communicating with other people and interacting with them, and the output of that interaction is extremely valuable when it's genuine and legitimate. I managed a 600,000 person forum which was about personal electronics in my past, and the looking up the topics that would bubble up and seeing who those experts were and understanding, really asking them, like, what would you do if this forum disappeared? Like, why do you feel it's so great? And using that as inspiration for the ahead of the, not in this case, ahead of the registration, that content, because giving somebody the feeling that, whoa, there's somebody that's always there, that is there, or everyone's showing off their gaming rigs, which was actually one of the most popular areas of the forum. It's showing off, it's highlighting personal value, it's highlighting business value, it's giving, it's I'm in a mastermind where if somebody drops a page in it, and is like, hey, can you check out this page, like audit this page, improve this page, how would you do it? Like, I always respond, like, what made me so willing to respond? Like, that's what you're trying to capture in a bottle with these communities, and that can inspire like content. Like, hey, in our community, if you show a picture, you're going to get feedback on it. Maybe it's a photography community, or if you drop a page in there, some guy named Jeff's going to roll in there and he's going to tell you how to improve it. Like, what are those scenarios for your community? And that can inspire exciting, how-to content, or frankly, just selling the community. The community starts to sell itself. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we are trying to do more and more is like, we think about content in two kind of streams that are parallel to one another. Right. But we know, as content strategists, what people are searching for. We've got this kind of top level down view of what we should be writing about. But we're using the community to originate and develop what we call passion posts. And these are not directly, we're not trying to directly target a keyword, but what we're trying to, but it's more topical relevance. It's topical relevance, it's completely original, and we're reducing the friction to publishing. So our pillar content can be stuff that we write, but it can be supported by stuff that people want to write about. So in the forum, if someone has written something really interesting that we think is cool, we say, hey, can we republish that? Or can we turn this into a post on our website? And then we publish it. And we've got this, we're thinking about the topic cluster. We're thinking about the keywords that are in there. We're maybe doing some tweaking, adding in a few words here and there. But then our homepage is filled with content that actually looks like and reflects the community that we want to build, rather than going to the homepage and it looking like a list of keywords. So I think doing these things in parallel with one another helps cultivate that community as well, and really helps us develop those things that are bubbling up organically within the community. Gives that some legs as well.
That is worth the price of admission. I've been doing that for over 10 years. It's a secret weapon, what you just described. It works. And it not only works because it's getting those pages are getting direct traffic. The membership feels good because you shined a spotlight on them. For you, it grows authority. Like you said, it expands those clusters, it drives legitimate expertise-driven topical authority. I mean, and it works. So yeah, I mean, you just described something that's worth a tremendous amount for anyone that has access to a community. It also is one thing that I give advice on for folks if they're looking to buy forums, right? That's outside of this topic, but how many of those things can you see would be inspiration, because that's a great way to connect a site that exists to a forum. What are the do you do competitive analysis? Do you look at other cohort for communities or ones that aren't doing the things that we just described to inspire, or is that part of your process?
It is, but we I think it can be very easy to get distracted, and I think copycatting is dangerous, because if someone is doing something well, just trying to emulate what they do and do it better, I mean, there's a lot of catching up to do. So I think our strategy has really been to pioneer what we think works, to build, test, and learn ourselves, and iterate without worrying too much about what's going on elsewhere, because I think otherwise we can get pulled in a million different directions. We see what they're doing over there and it looks like it's working, and they're doing something different, and then we end up just with a smorgasbord of stuff and ideas and half-baked tactics. So yeah, we try and not get too distracted with that, but find inspiration from other communities. So not necessarily within our niches, but hey, what a community is doing that seems to be super effective. What can we learn from that? But I think this has kind of been my experience of gurus in general, is that if you read, like, for example, like Neil Patel, or you read and consume some of the advice that people are giving out, generic kind of advice, it will often not work in your environment because of various reasons. And I think the temptation can be, well, these people are super successful, I've got to do what they're telling me to do because they're super rich, they're really successful, and it doesn't take into consideration the nuance of your community or the nuance of what you've created, which is special and different. And so I think embracing the special snowflake that you have, and just kind of working out, what is your differentiator, and rather than trying to become something that's generic, be different, become, like, leverage your differentiation, whatever that might be, and that becomes your competitive advantage. And I think as we try and copy other people, we lose that competitive advantage. We lose what's individual and different about it. So find what's different and make that your playing card, and rather than trying to copy people.
Wow, it's like you're reading my diary, man. No, I that's something that I was literally just speaking about. Is what you said. I think you said embrace your special snowflake. I think we might have to go tweet that in a minute. But no, right on. Everything you said computes. It's also ulterior motives and bias inside of community can be very damaging. And why is this person writing all of this content? Is there truly a there? Is it, are you selling a course? Are you selling, but is that community actually legit? And I think that when you're talking about, your journey going from, access to templates to masterminds to the actual community access to, living on the merit of the value that you provide, is very different than do what I do because I'm successful. Do what I do because I'm successful, or the word system, makes me want to run out the door. And I know that there's value. There's value in any package, and there's value in anything. It's just it's not a fit for me, because I do. The merit of being an expert and the merit of providing unique value is key, and I love that. What other things do you look for in your community for community management or bias, or things that might actually lead to toxicity in your in your various communities. And I don't mean necessarily moderation, but just, hey, this isn't going the direction we wanted it to go, and I'm a little bit concerned about this influence on longevity. So
yeah, do you know, in our community, we haven't had too much of that, and we haven't been like, I'd say we're pretty hard at moderating, and so like people don't see it, so they don't it doesn't happen. Like we monitor it very closely and shut it down incredibly quickly, boot people out as soon as we see something that we don't like. Like we're pretty harsh but fair, so that hasn't really been so much of a problem. I think one of the things that we did though, let's talk about that transition from Slack to what we've now done, which is move to Circle. So this was something that we launched Slack back in, I don't know, 2017 or something. Slack was a newish tool around. It seemed cool. It is cool, and we use it day to day for our like work communication. Obviously, I'm in there right now on the Content Strategy Collective as well. But one of the things that we've discovered was that we'd be having the same conversations again and again. And we had the free version of Slack because for us to pay for the monthly license for as many people as we had was going to be $10,000 or something. Right. Like it was. So what would happen is the conversation would disappear after 10,000 messages. And when you've got that many people, we were just having this revolving door, kind of, well, not door of people, but of conversations where the same conversations would happen again and again. And there was we weren't building anything. It was just a dialogue, a conversation that never really got anywhere. It didn't develop, it didn't mature. And so what we decided was we want some maturity here. And actually what we're excited about as when we're building communities, what we talk about is building the playbook. And this is in contrast to, if any of you are familiar with the world of project management, you'll know that there's something called the PMBOK, the Project Management Book of Knowledge, which is a hefty textbook in which they try to distill all the important things that you need to know about project management. And so we kind of see this as the antithesis of a textbook. It's a playbook that's evolving. And our community now, and what we're doing within the community, is together developing this playbook, because the nature of the conversations that were happening in Slack were all about, how do I do this? How do I tackle this situation? What's the best way to do this thing? What's working for you? Has anyone tried this? And that kind of sounds like a playbook. Hey, I've got some scenarios. What do I do in those situations? What are the best way to tackle these things? So yeah, we made this difficult decision to boot out the 4,000 people that we had in Slack. At the end of the year, I just sent a message to everyone saying, guys, this is it. Thanks for being with us on the journey. If you want to still be part of this, you can find us in our new fancy forum over here. And that was a really difficult decision to make. But the reality was that in Slack, we had some paid members, some people who weren't paying. There was no way that we could pay to turn on Slack for everybody. It would have been way too expensive. But also just the nature of Slack, and it is a communication tool. It's not topic based. I mean, yes, you can have different channels, but you lose the you lose the knowledge. So we decided to make that difficult decision to transition over to, and we're using a platform called Circle. And yeah, this is, I guess we've been rolling it now for about 4 months. But yeah, we decided to switch off Slack at the end of the year.
Wow, that's amazing. The archivist, the Slack archivist, who can turn that into a forum. I mean, that's your killer app, right? It's when that comes out, right? And that's something that you're trying to instill into, and by using Circle, and that's that. But I think the whole punchline there is the communication is content. The open communication in your forum is content. There's a reason why bulletins live as long as it has.
Yeah.
Right. How do you harness that and use Slack to your advantage? How do you use that? I mean, the AMA that we have right after this podcast, right after this webinar, there's going to be a blog post written about that AMA. I mean, there's a reason for that, right? And
Yeah.
and like you said, it requires work to create that archive right now in Slack if you're not a paid customer, and making a, in order for you to pay in Slack, you're talking about, something like $7 a user a month, and that's, impossible. It's impossible for a free community. I mean, it's impossible for most paid communities. I mean, it's just the monetization isn't there. But yeah, you're on the nose. That's interesting that you found that out and just said, let's go for it. Let's flip it over to Circle. I'm going to deep dive Circle after this discussion. By the way, I don't believe either of us are being paid by Circle, but we need to figure that one out too. Awesome. So how do you think about, or how do you get inspiration for the more high level pillar content? So the thought leadership content that you're going to do, is that you had mentioned some of your search volume, old school keyword difficulty. I know we've had heart to hearts about personalizing your difficulty and shooting bullets that can hit the target, and that's where you are crushing it, frankly. And how do you think about what's the next thought leadership area we're going to get into, or what's the next website we're going to build? How do you get that?
Yes.
You built some new sites, you built some new communities recently. I mean, you are the person to ask this question.
Yeah. So it comes from conversations, and I think this is why having the danger of being stuck in tools looking at these things is that it disconnects you from the people, the community part of it. And so yeah, we spend a lot of time talking to people, just having conversations with practitioners to try and understand what their challenges are, what their pain points are, what are the things that they're struggling with, what are the things that they're finding super easy, what are their lessons learned. And actually the podcast for us is a great way of uncovering some of that, because in having that conversation, we're recording it and then we're repurposing it as a podcast, as a video. So we're doing our customer research, and we're using that to drive our editorial plan. Now, there are some things that we know are kind of evergreen challenges for people. So things like they're trying to find a new job, they're trying to find a promotion, they are they've got imposter syndrome when they've just landed that new job. They're managing people for the first time, or they've got a boss who is a pain in the ass. Now, these kind of things are evergreen, so we know that we can write about them. They're always going to be super relevant. Then we can just iterate on that content. But what we're trying to find are the particularly because we're focused on digital disciplines. So this means that as, for example, people start working more with artificial intelligence or data warehousing, for example, it means that we can then begin to build content around the topics that are emerging and become increasingly relevant. So we've got an eye on trends, we've got an eye on technology, we've got a conversation going on with the community, and we're trying to marry these things together. So for example, we're exploring, what is artificial intelligence in project management? What does it mean for project managers? How can we use data to make better decisions? Things like that. So we're trying to marry these two things together.
Nice. I think that's great. That wonderful insights as you're staying on top of it. It's not cut and dry. You're not using one data point. You're making good decisions. I have a great question from the audience, and thank you for everybody that's sending along. There are a few that have come in so far that are very, very in the weeds, and we are going to wait for them. One of them is about your vendor selection process, which I appreciate for the new forum platform. So we'll get into the Slack. You don't have to go through that. I bet you that's a pretty long one, but I love that question. But thank you so much. One I'll ask here is, what do you do to internally to other members of the group? You are the founder, so I don't know how this decision-making process goes. If they are questioning the merits of creating content on topics that might not generate a lot of direct traffic. So this is a comment. I'll rephrase that. That was the question that came in. I'll rephrase that as we encounter this with a lot of clients in they have historically used search volume to guide all of their creation, and they have lots of gaps in their clusters as a result, right? So how do you talked about passion content?
Yeah.
I think that was the word you used. No, passion posts. You talk about passion
Yeah.
posts, but how would you internally make the case for writing content on long tail or passion posts? That's a good way to phrase that. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, that it goes, I guess, back to the brand piece, which is actually just parking the tools for a second.
Yeah.
And if you were thinking about, you know, writing a book, would you be chasing, would you be doing it by like finding all the keywords and just kind of plopping them all together and kind of trying to sell a book that way? I think you'd be thinking about a topic, you'd be writing about what you know is relevant as an expert. And I think sometimes, well, there's a couple of things, like the volumes are wrong. so that's
We
one
make sure
thing.
everybody knows this. The volumes are all wrong, just so you know.
And like, you know, especially at the lower levels.
Right.
Well, I mean, you know, where something has a volume of 10 or it's 0 volume, like whatever, there's people searching for it. If you know it's relevant, then write about it. And I think the tools, I think we can rely too heavily on tools and think, okay, the tool says this, I must follow what the tool says. Like, the tool is just a tool. It's not you still need to use your brain. And I think, so as we're thinking about, okay, what should we write about? That's where our subject matter expertise comes into it. And if you haven't got the subject matter expertise, you need to hire a subject matter expert to map out in their mind what the topic looks like and what the clusters could be, how these content topics relate to one another. Algorithmically, yeah, we can look at data and we can see people also search for, we can do all these things. But actually a subject matter expert is going to have a better idea than what Google has been able to piece together, like at this point. So I'd say think of it more like you're trying to write a book, and like, what would the chapters of the book be, rather than necessarily relying on the data, relying on the numbers, because it will be wrong, and you'll find that you get a bunch of traffic for stuff that you shouldn't theoretically based on the tools, and you'll find, you know, you write about something and no one's looking at it. So use the tools as a guide, and use your subject matter expertise, and that's where passion posts come in. It's like, because you know, if we're covering a topic comprehensively, and we know that this topic or this post means that we're covering it more comprehensively, like it matters. Yeah, so try and use your brain rather than the tools a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you've really nailed it from my perspective. Obviously, that's everything that we've built at our business. As you know, it's to really take a subject matter expert and make them deadly with their content, make sure that they can put their best foot forward, but also someone leveling them up to be at the level of saying, this is what a subject matter expert would write if they were writing this on this topic or covering this topic. But you should always think, I think you've said it best, I think, you should always think, think about that list, the judgment panel, like, you know, some in a dark room, and all the subject matter experts in your space are going to read these articles, and are they going to give you a thumbs up or thumbs down after reading it? I mean, there's an inherent, you should always be thinking about that. It's, are you going, because you might put a page out there that for some reason punches above its weight and generates the traffic out here, and then you've got a bunch of teeth with no mouth. I mean, honestly, because you got this page, it's not about anything. It doesn't solve anyone's problem. And for one reason or another, you know, we can get into some of the whys on that. You're now reliant on it. Now, what do? You got to make that better. You got to improve that page. But do you want that to be your process? So I think that, yeah, I think the one thing is you want to know where you have existing authority, where you have a lot of content, where you have a lot of great content, where you have appealed to experts. You got to know where you have gaps. You got to know where you have existing authority, so that you can create content that's going to work. I mean, that getting a metric for difficulty that is personalized, or making it up on your own, using a subject matter expert, right? And saying, yeah, you guys need content in this area because you're missing it, that's a process as well. But I think you've hit it on the head. It's sometimes you do have to say, will this tell the story that I'm an expert more? Will this add to my book? Will this add to the value that my site is bringing? I love that, the way that you broke that down. All right, cool. Well, we are going to jump into the Slack community in a minute. But what other things would you say after having run communities? What would be the hit list for someone who's starting a brand new community, and that you would say, do these things, do not do these things, and then we can end on that.
Yeah, so I mean, we're in the process of doing this ourselves, launching new communities. And I think the most important thing is just it has to be based on, the community has to be based on some kind of insight. Just deciding to start a community as a, hey, I'm going to start a community, I'm going to start a Slack group and think that's it. That's not really going to work. Like there has to be a common challenge, a common problem that you're solving, something that you're addressing. Just spinning up a Slack group's not really going to do it. And I think part of that is, and there's a great book with the names now. I think it's called Together, the book. But it all talks about the importance of building community with people, not for people. And I think often when we're trying to do things like build community, we are doing it for people. We're doing it because we have a motive. Obviously we have a motive, like it's not entirely altruistic. There's a reason why we're building this community. But if we can find a way to do that in parallel or in conjunction with people, so that we get their buy-in right from the start, we understand their pain points and we're meeting those pain points in some way, then we're going to have something that lasts. I think if there's so many examples of people spending millions of dollars trying to start communities for people, for their audience, and them not succeeding because their audience weren't engaged in it, they weren't involved. So get your users, get your people, get their insights, do it in collaboration with them, together with them, so that it's useful rather than just as a resource, because the community isn't the technology. It's not Circle or Slack. It's the people and it's their challenges and helping one another. So bringing those people together in a meaningful way is what's going to make it sink or swim.
Yeah, that's a great way to end. And when those people are together, they make content. That's my parting word. But thank you so much for joining us, Ben. It's been an awesome discussion. There's some ways on the screen of getting in touch with us on all the major media networks. Is that an underscore on BWZ?
I think it might even be 2, yeah.
Double underscore. So make sure you take note if you're gonna tap into Black and White Zebra. Ben Aston, and thank you so much for joining us. Hey, 15% off any self-serve package, Webinar 15. But yeah, please give us a call. Join us in the Slack community for the AMA right afterwards. And as always, we really, really appreciate you watching this live or listening to the recording. Thanks again, Ben. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, Jeff.